Since we started publishing this series, we've been asking listeners for information about Eamon Cooke. Over 60 people have come forward, including victims speaking out for the very first time. Among those who emailed documentaries at rte.ie was a man who, in the mid-1980s, was an 18-year-old on his way home to Inchicore.
One night late, I was coming up from Kilmainham up into Highland shop. It was a newsagent shop, and I went in, spoke to the owner there for a couple of minutes.
When Mark, not his real name, left the shop, the street was deserted, and he stumbled across something on the ground.
I stood on a diary, small plastic diary, so I picked it up, had a quick look at it. There was money in the back of it, but it turned out to be dollars. So I just stuck it back inside. I had a look around, there was no one there.
Mark hurried home, where he looked inside the diary.
And the centre pages, the first line on it said, I contacted guard, such a name, told him the drugs would be there Wednesday evening in the Wharf Tavern. Don't raid the place before 8 o'clock because I'll still be there.
The diary Mark had found was packed with tips for Gardaí to seize drugs and those dealing drugs.
There was a series of items like that, times and dates and things that had gone on. It was like an achievements record. The whole pages were full.
There was a number on the front of the diary, a phone number that Mark recognised, but couldn't remember why.
The only thing that was on the front of the book was a phone number, 758684, and I knew it, but I couldn't place it.
Moments later, the doorbell rang.
And my father opened the door, and there was a man standing there, and I recognised him straight away.
Immediately, Mark knew what the number was. It was Radio Dublin's phone number, and in that moment, everything made sense.
It was Eamon Cooke. He looked like Columbo. He had a Mac coat on him, and he had the top of it held in with one hand because it was starting to rain slightly. And he said, I had lost a diary, and I believe someone might have picked it up. And my father said, why, how would you know that? And he said, I got direction from Highland shop. The diary isn't important, he said, his exact words, but there's money in the back of it, and the dollars are of sentimental value. So my father said to him, well, you obviously own it, so, because you know the dollars are in it. So my father just folded it back up and handed it to him, and he said good night. And my father shut the door and said to me, don't get involved with that fella, ever. Because at the time, there was a drugs issue, and if he was working with the guards, it was his business.
Mark never encountered Cooke again, but he knew what he had seen in that diary.
He was informing, yeah. He was telling the guards when to raid, and he would not be there.
Mark's encounter with Cooke leaves a lingering question. What did Eamon Cooke stand to gain by acting as a Garda informant, tracking drug deals around Dublin? I'm Peter Mulryan. From RTE Documentary on One, this is Pirate Predator. And a warning before we begin, this series contains reference to child sex abuse. Episode 6, Duplicity. At the end of our last episode, it was 1986, and Anne had finally told Gardaí that as a child, she had been abused by Eamon Cooke.
The one thing that did come from it was Cooke found out.
Cooke found out you'd been to the guards?
Yes.
How did he find that out?
Don't ask me.
It's not clear if Gardaí tipped Cooke off or questioned him, but either way, Anne was left facing the consequences of Cooke now knowing she had complained about him to Gardaí.
And he arrived at my workplace, and he walked into the shop. And there was people coming in and out. I was there on my own, and he just stood there. And then eventually, after maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it was just him facing me. And so he walked up closer and he said, 20 Rothmans, please. I said, get the fuck out of here. And then he went into a rage. I'll be back, all that kind of threats.
That encounter left Anne rattled. More than a decade after her abuse began, Cooke was still intimidating her. She alerted Gardaí, but again, nothing happened. Cooke, however, became even more vindictive and threatening.
And he did come back, only this time he came back with a little girl. A little girl who was maybe 7, 8, and he sent her in to the shop. And she was crying when she came in. Now, when I look back at that, I'm thinking, I should have called guards. I should have said, grab that child. But you're in your own frozen fear. You know, I was only 18, 19. It's one of my greatest regrets, that little girl's face.
We don't know who the little girl in Cooke's company was, but she was clearly under his control, clearly another victim. Throughout the 1980s, the number of Cooke's victims began to grow exponentially. Through both new victims reaching out to us and through research, our producers, Nicoline and Shauna, can give us a glimpse into some of those experiences.
It's really difficult to digest these stories. So we know from our research that in the 1980s he was abusing 2 sisters. On one occasion, he brought the older sister to the Savoy Cinema on O'Connell Street, where he sat beside her and started publicly kissing her. He would have been 51 at this stage, and she only a child. An usherette witnessed this kissing and called Cooke out on it, asking him to leave the cinema. An argument broke out, and the victim stood up for Cooke, claiming he was her uncle. And that really demonstrates that power dynamic that would have been at play there, you know, a vulnerable child.
A woman got in touch with us to tell us how Cooke assaulted her. When she was just 8 years old, she called in to see her older sister, who was a telephonist at Radio Dublin. Eamon Cooke met her and told her to follow him into a room where he'd show her some toys. He then began to grope her, putting his hands under her clothing. Now, this young girl's mother had just died, and Cooke knew that and took full advantage of her vulnerability.
As we know, Cooke was involved in contra deals with travel agencies in exchange for advertising at Radio Dublin. He got his hands on US flights, which led him to travel to America with 2 15-year-old girls. All was seemingly going very well until they arrived at the hotel. Cooke had booked 1 hotel room with 1 bed. So this dream holiday for these girls turned into a nightmare.
And we're also aware of another young teenager who became pregnant by Cooke after being raped by him in the 1980s. With help from others, she travelled to the UK to get an abortion. Years later, when considering testifying against him, she was warned that Cooke could retaliate by exposing the people who helped her travel for her abortion, which was a criminal offence at the time. So she backed away and took no further action.
It's hard to imagine the pain that all these victims have gone through and just how ruthless Cooke was and willing to commit such awful crimes without conscience and without fear.
By 1987, Eamon Cooke's marriage to his second wife, Joan, was over. They both moved out of Radio Dublin's headquarters in Inchicore Road, with Cooke relocating to Tala in the west of the city, and Joan eventually settling on Dublin's south side. And through it all, Radio Dublin kept on air and kept on broadcasting.
All-new sound of Radio Dublin.
Through the day we're playing better music.
The all-new sound, Radio Dublin.
Better music, music, Radio Dublin.
Rockin' Europe, this is Radio Dublin from the heart of Dublin, Ireland's capital city.
Radio Dublin was still attracting advertising and still making money, lots of money for Eamon Cooke.
406,000 people. Can't be wrong. Advertise on Radio Dublin, 536644.
Advertising gets a great reaction.
Radio Dublin advertising. Now that satellite TV has arrived, let the Colour TV Centre put you in the picture. Colour TVs from only £99. Black and white.
21 minutes past 1 o'clock, Radio Dublin at lunchtime. How are you today? We're giving away albums, 7-Up Music Machine albums coming up after 1:30 today.
But the golden age of pirate radio was drawing to a close. And that book I was writing about the legendary scene, Radio, was published in the summer of 1988. By then, I'd moved to the UK, and if I'm honest, I forgot all about Eamon Cooke. But he hadn't forgotten about me, or my book, something that would come back to haunt me. As for Radio Dublin, well, by the end of 1988, a new Broadcasting Act came into force, regulating the airways, closing all the pirate stations and looking to formally award new licences to local and commercial radio stations.
The pirates are alive and well and indeed thriving on your radio dial. About 70 of them are on the airwaves in Ireland, some big, some small. But for all of them, the good times will end on the 31st. After that, the heavy hand of the law will have a heavy weapon to deal with offenders.
And so, on New Year's Eve, 1988, the pirate airwaves around Ireland fell silent.
Friday, the 30th of December, 1988. It's 6 o'clock. This is Sunshine 101 closing down.
It was the end of an era.
Thank you for being with us for the past 8 years, and especially today. Good luck, and God bless you all.
But if we know one thing about Eamon Cooke, it's that he doesn't fear authority. He launched a constitutional appeal to keep Radio Dublin on the air as a pirate station.
In the meantime, by continuing to broadcast, he's facing the possibility of fines of up to £20,000 and or 2 years in prison.
We're not defying the law. Our position is we feel the new Broadcasting Act violates the Constitution, and we've brought it before Justice Hamilton in the High Court.
Despite the changes in the broadcasting laws, Radio Dublin just kept on broadcasting illegally.
Radio Dublin, our radio station, is still progressing along. Its station news this January 1989, at a time when we should be closed.
The month after this broadcast, the Department of Communications raided the Inchicore studios twice in 1 week.
Very older raid, I'm afraid. There's more transmitting equipment gone. 8:20 this morning.
It did get back up and running, but was really only limping along.
So, of course, we changed location and it's back again. Temporary programming running now for tonight. We're settled into some kind of normal.
As the Radio Dublin empire crumbled around him, Cooke kept broadcasting. One Sunday, on his own weekly news, he pitched a new idea to his listeners. A telephone helpline for children. When Anne saw this reported in a newspaper, well, that brought everything to the surface for her.
And then I saw that the piece that had been ripped out, now I know by my mother, was a piece in the newspaper with Eamon Cooke discussing his plans to start a childline on the radio station. My mind exploded at the potential of what he could have access to that. And to be honest, at that point, the only solution that was evident to me was that he had to die.
Anne went to her kitchen cutlery drawer.
What I was doing was I was arming myself with knives to kill Cooke. And it was 2 a.m. in the morning, and I set off down the road. I knocked on the door. Eamon Cooke came to the door. I didn't introduce, I didn't say a word, I just lunged. And that forced a push and push situation on his door, me trying to push in, him trying to push me out. Eventually, he won, and the door was closed. I began to kick the door through, and though the glass went through my boot and into my foot, at that point, my mother arrived. She began screaming at him too. Why did you do that to my daughter? I think it was the first time my mother ever spoke to him.
With Cooke hiding inside the house, Anne turned her attention to his Jaguar.
I started to just pick up the boulders that lined his drive and level those into his car. The white Jag with Radio Dublin is written on the side. At that point, the coward ran out of his house, punched my mother in the chest, hit her to the ground, and fled back up with me in hot pursuit now, enraged that he'd done that. He got back into his door and I just returned to his car. We could hear the police arriving, and then they had to arrest my mother and me.
After this incident, Anne's family felt it was best for her to leave Dublin and move to London to stay with an older sister.
Within 2 weeks of that incident, I was packed up and thrown out of the country. I'd lost all my friends. I was just there one day, and the next I was gone.
Cooke pressed criminal charges against both Anne and her mother, but he never showed up in court and the case was eventually thrown out. In the summer of 1989, Cooke chalked up another criminal offence when he married for a third time. This was a bigamous marriage, as his second wife, Joan, was still alive and they never divorced. Cooke's third wife was a young single mother who gave some insight into their relationship when she spoke to the Sunday World in 2016.
When I met him in 1989, I was in my 20s and he was in his 50s. I didn't have family. I grew up in care, so I had no parents to turn to. I was like a sitting duck. I myself had been a victim of paedophile priest Bill Carney.
Father Bill Carney was a prolific paedophile who ran a sex ring in Dublin and who abused countless victims during the 1970s, 80s and 90s. And as for Cooke,
at first he seemed charming and we married after we had known each other for about 6 weeks.
So I'm actually looking at the marriage certificate of Eamon Cooke's third marriage.
Cooke actually brought this young woman to the UK to get married. Our producer, Nicoline, can tell us more.
It was the summer of 1989. He obviously travelled across the Irish Sea, presumably to avoid the Irish authorities. And it notes Eamon Cooke as a widower, which we know was a total lie. And it tells us that the residence of the couple at the time of the marriage was the Wingfield Hotel in Blackpool, a one-star hotel near the South Shore.
Having always said he wanted to have lots of children, and after 2 childless marriages, Cooke set out with his new wife to start having a large family. The newlyweds first settled in an estate in Tala, and that's where I am now.
Morning.
Knocking on doors.
Do you remember him at all, Eamon Cooke?
To see if anyone remembers the family.
He would have lived across the road.
He did, yeah. I didn't really know the man. He went in and out, like he lived so close to us. He was inconspicuous. I knew his name was Cooke. Never spoke to him in my life.
To some of his neighbours, Eamon Cooke appeared like a relatively normal family man.
Kids seemed to like him. This road was playground for children.
Did you ever meet the man?
Only in passing.
Yeah.
Never really spoke to him.
No, not really, no.
Now I thought my kids were down there playing quite happy because he had everything in his back garden for children.
So what kind of stuff would he have in the garden?
Playthings like swings that we couldn't have had and slides.
Everything to attract kids.
And always had parties, house parties for the kids, yeah. And he'd bring them in and let them make the cakes. And...
Did you have any idea at the time what was going on?
Oh, Jesus, no.
But it seems not every neighbour liked Cooke.
Nobody on this road can tell you anything about him because nobody knew him. Kept to himself.
Yeah?
He used to give you a feeling. He just had that... It was kind of menacing.
We know Cooke abused children who lived in this area. And we also know he didn't stay there for long. By the autumn of 1990, Cooke sold his house in Tala before buying in another part of West Dublin, a house which would double up as both his family home and Radio Dublin's new headquarters.
Broadcasting on 1188 kHz AM and 98.8 FM in stereo. This is Radio Dublin Network News.
Now, obviously this is the late 80s, early 90s. It wasn't a time of great financial stability in the country.
We've managed to find the previous owner of the house Eamon Cooke bought in 1990, and she can still remember selling her home to Eamon Cooke.
So housing, sale of houses and different things like that wasn't like what it is today. So we put the house up for sale thinking that it would take us forever. And within a week we had the viewing and it was Eamon Cooke. I don't think I initially got a good vibe from him at all. But when you're in the process of selling a house, you know, I was told he was a cash buyer. So that went through fairly quickly.
Buying a house for cash in 1990 in Ireland tells you something about the money Cooke made through Radio Dublin over the previous 15 years. But this was just one of the many property purchases he made throughout this time. He also bought land in Sligo and other locations, including the Dublin Mountains. But Cooke never flashed his cash. By late 1990, Cooke had moved his wife and children into their new home in West Dublin, and Radio Dublin began broadcasting from the box bedroom.
That's about it, station news-wise, this Sunday afternoon. Stay tuned to the station and let us know what you think of us and that.
He would present a programme on a Sunday afternoon called Station News, and he would come on for an hour.
This is Kevin Brannigan, now CEO of Radio Nova. But back in the early 90s, Kevin was just starting out in radio, and he knew of Eamon Cooke.
The perception I have about Eamon was that he was a person who had to always be having a war with somebody.
The pirate radio wars were always a little dirty. Competitors vying for the same audiences, often in the same places, but none more so than Eamon Cooke, who was intent on protecting his patch, whatever it took.
Checking out 105 FM. Also, hi.
Our radio station at the time was called NSR, and he began to block our signal.
Around the clock, this is NSR Music Radio.
This would have been in late 1993, and he began to block the FM signal. So we decided to go to find his transmission site. We knew it was in Saggart, but we weren't quite sure. We couldn't find the site, but there was a guy in the JCB in a field. And we could hear the sound of the bucket clanging off the ground and bang, bang, and the sound of this JCB in the middle of digging earth. And I looked over, and it was actually Eamon.
In the JCB?
In the JCB. And he was digging this huge hole in the ground all by himself up the mountains at 7 o'clock on a Saturday evening, and there was a pile of earth maybe 10 feet tall beside him, and he was digging and digging and digging and digging. It just was an exceptionally creepy scene.
The next day, Kevin heard Cooke explaining what he had been up to, almost threatening Kevin live on Radio Dublin.
He went into a story about how he wanted to put a message out to the Department of Communications and to anybody else who felt they could interfere with his business or his transmissions, that he had built what he called man traps on his site. That's how he described it. And that he was entitled to protect his land from anybody who wanted to go on it. He sent a message out to anybody who even thought about going on his land to be very careful.
Decades later, Gardaí would search this site in the Dublin Mountains for missing schoolboy Philip Kearns. But in the 1990s, Cooke was not yet linked to the case. Throughout the early 90s, Radio Dublin kept on going. Cooke and his third wife continued to have children almost annually. In December 1994, Cooke's third wife became the first victim to speak publicly about clerical sex abuse in Ireland, exposing the horrific abuse she suffered from Father Bill Carney. Eamon Cooke stood by her side, even detailing to RTE News how he had personally tried to catch the priest confessing to the abuse.
We recorded a number of his conversations, both when he came to visit us and when he'd telephone. So recording of those conversations and transcripts went off to the guards and to the church. They did have opportunity before that to defrock him. He had been in court on an indecent assault charge and was convicted in 1984. Now, the church should have been or would have been aware of that.
Years later, reports would reach Gardaí tying Eamon Cooke to a 1980s paedophile ring alongside Father Bill Carney. When you consider that and Cooke's history of abuse, it's a staggering irony that he stood in front of the nation publicly championing a victim of child abuse while continuing to be a prolific predator himself.
I opened a newspaper and there was a headline in it, and it was Eamon Cooke and this woman petitioning a court case against the Catholic Church. So that just spiralled me out of control a bit.
By now, Siobhan was in her 20s and married with her first child. Having tried to bury Cooke's abuse for so long, this was the moment things began to fall apart for her.
I was having a drink nearly every third night or something just to try and sleep. But then the nightmares were getting too much. I had flashbacks and I went back to the GP and she put me on medication. I'd never been on anything strong in my life. And they didn't work. And I remember one time saying, maybe if I take an extra 2 or 3 I might sleep, because I was taking these instead of the alcohol. And I woke up in St. James's because they thought I was trying to take an overdose, which I actually wasn't. I was trying to sleep.
By the late 1990s, Cooke's wife had given birth to more children, 6 in total now. But behind closed doors, Cooke had revealed his true character almost as soon as they got married, and that continued throughout their marriage. As she later detailed,
"It didn't take long until he turned nasty. He tried to strangle me. Another time, he tried to drown me in the bathtub. And on another occasion, he kicked me down the stairs. He controlled everything, but he was obsessed with the radio station."
By now, social services had become involved with Eamon Cooke's family, but his obsession with Radio Dublin continued, which was now broadcasting from a shed out the back of his family home.
My name is John Leonard. I was the manager of Radio Dublin from 96, 97 up to about 99.
Increasingly irrelevant to audiences, Cooke tried to pivot Radio Dublin to a country and Irish format and brought John on board to help. He remembers one particular day in Radio Dublin.
This day, after I had finished my slot on radio, I walked in just to say hello, and the door to the kitchen was closed, and I walked in without announcing myself, and I saw him with a young girl seated on the chair, and I didn't like what I saw. So I was taken aback, actually.
John told a fellow DJ he'd seen Cooke acting inappropriately with a young child, only for the colleague to reveal they'd also witnessed Cooke in a compromising position with a different child the previous week.
We decided we'll go over to Ronaldstown Police Station. So a gentleman, I think he was the detective guard, a very, very nice man. I think his name was Jerry Kelly.
This is a name you're going to hear a lot of going forward. Retired Detective Inspector Jerry Kelly.
And he brought us in and he said, "Well, what can I do for you?" We told him what each of us had seen. And he said, "Hold on there for a moment." And he went over to the old-time filing cabinets, opened the door and took out a file that would be weigh half a ton.
It turns out Cooke had already come to Jerry Kelly's attention, and he was building a file on the captain.
I had a file on my desk which referred to the abuse of a young boy. It had come from the authorities through Garda headquarters.
The file on Jerry's desk had come from Europol, from British police.
We took on that investigation. It was a matter of having to arrest Eamon Cooke and interview him in relation to these allegations. This boy, he was in the care of the social services.
Cooke was questioned by Gardaí, but UK Crown prosecutors did not proceed with any charges, partially due to Cooke's denials and threats of his own legal action.
Extremely intelligent man. He was absolutely ruthless in his approach to things, but a very bright man, and you underestimated him at your peril. And I think when we started dealing with him, we actually had no idea of how cunning, how ruthless, and how capable he was.
But Cooke's arrest and questioning didn't go unnoticed locally, with news of it eventually reaching Siobhan.
I made my mind up then. I went home, discussed it with my husband, and I said, I can't live with this anymore. I discussed it with my parents. I said, I have to say something. I didn't want to be part of the equation that would make other children suffer.
And so, in 1999, Siobhan rang the Garda station.
I was in Ronaldstown Station one night, this I remember quite clearly, and I got a phone call out of the blue. This lady called Siobhan rang me, and she said she wanted to report abuse in relation to Eamon Cooke.
But they took it very seriously, and they were very nice, and they said, well, it's up to you, Siobhan, if you want to make a statement, which I did.
Siobhan then got in touch with Anne, who was still living in London, to tell her what she'd done.
Siobhan had rang me to say that the guards were now interested. What do you think? And I said, look, well, I'm happy to talk to them, give them my number. So they called, and then Jerry Kelly flew over to London to interview me and get a statement.
Siobhan and Anne would eventually become the heroes of this story. The wheels of justice were finally turning, and not a moment too soon.
How are you?
You're not gone to bed yet?
No.
Oh, this is terrible.
Me ma and me dad went to a do. So how are you keeping?
Oh, great. Can't complain.
That's all right.
As this series has been publishing, someone who used to work for Radio Dublin contacted us to say that in 2014, a recording was uploaded online of a conversation between Cooke and a young girl.
I have to see you sometime again.
Yeah. So long since I think it must be years ago.
Years? Nah.
Feels like years anyway. Yeah, sure, if you do not tomorrow, I might see you.
Yeah.
The circumstances of this call are not clear. We believe it was recorded in the mid to late 1990s, and it appears to give a very dark glimpse into Cooke grooming a young girl.
Do you not get out anywhere and get into town or anything?
No, not really. I'm not allowed into town on my own. No. My mum won't let me.
How old are you now?
Have a guess.
Oh, I haven't a clue.
I already told you.
How old you are? Yeah, you did tell me all right.
I'm not telling you again. I'm sick telling you things twice and you won't even listen to me.
Go on, tell me.
No, I'm not.
On this call, we can hear Cooke referring to this child by her name. He knew where she lived, and he knew some of her friends' names.
No.
What do you sound about 14?
14?
Oh.
No, not really.
13?
No. Yeah. Going on 14. Not too bad.
This is what Siobhan and Anne were trying to stop. Future victims from being abused. But it wasn't going to be straightforward.
Early 2002, all set to go. Everybody full steam ahead until he came up with this thing on the morning of the trial.
8 victims agreed to press charges, but Cooke was going to do everything in his power to try and evade justice again.
Cooke came up with this idea that these offences had occurred 20 years earlier.
Join us for our 7th and final episode as we bring this story to a close.
So that was a major kick in the stomach. There was no doubt about that. Nobody seen that one coming.
If you've been affected by any issues raised in this episode, please visit rte.ie/helplines.